Hey everyone, I'm Roland, the CEO and co-founder of Chameleon.io. I'm going to talk to you about email design systems and dark mode, two very trendy topics these days. I've been involved in email marketing since 2008, and back then nobody really talked about email design systems or dark mode. Our lives as email marketers became just so much more complicated, and it takes almost twice the time to complete a single email creation project nowadays, simply because email marketers need to take care of so many things, including responsive email design, email client tests, personalization tags, automations, a tedious review and approval process, and now even dark mode. This all causes a single email creation project to take over 2 weeks, according to Litmus's most recent study. I believe a well-established email design system is the best remedy for this pain that I mentioned. But what does really an email design system mean? It is a set of design standards and reusable visual elements that help brands maintain consistency and reduce friction in their email and any kind of content creation workflows. This might sound like something from a university and complicated, but bear with me for another 15 minutes and it will make complete sense to you, I promise. So if you're not a design nerd, and you don't have to be, you might not know that this whole atomic design concept was first coined by Brad Frost in 2013. He pretty much figured out that no matter how complex an interface is, it can be broken down into small building blocks, and he called it atoms the after the most common terminology we use, for example, in the universe for the tiny little atomic molecule atoms that build up everything in our lives. And if we apply the same terminology to web interfaces, these atoms are simple HTML tags such as text, images, buttons, labels, links, and so forth. And these small fundamental elements can be compiled into bigger organisms and molecules and organisms. And these organisms are things as headers, footers, or hero units in emails terms. I don't want this to turn into chemistry class, so I use human terminology in the rest of the presentation. So design systems should include design standards, starting with fonts and colors, and combined with visual elements like text, images, buttons, spacers, that can all be compiled into blocks, or some people call them modules. It should also include a set of templates that cover the most common business use cases necessary for a brand. And these all need to be paired with a clear documentation on the intended use of each element. Without the documentation, it would be a complete mess, believe me. There are clear benefits of having an email design system in place, and really the most important is improved efficiency. It is thanks to the fact that less technical people can quickly create and update emails using the pre-designed design elements. It frees up a bunch of design and developer resources after the email design system is built. It creates a unified language inside the organization and distributed teams likewise. It also ensures brand consistency among different email types and also departments. It serves as an excellent education tool and reference for new employees, especially junior ones. And it also helps you ensure proper email rendering, even in dark mode. But what is really dark mode? It is a display settings for user interfaces such as laptops, desktops, mobile devices, or simply any kind of app. It means that instead of the default dark text on a light background, light text is presented on a dark, typically black background. This is something that shouldn't be surprising to you if you ever used a PC with with a dark monitor, because that's what we had, I think, like 30 years ago. Thankfully, light mode remains still the default setting for most apps, but dark mode started spreading a few years ago. And it was something that Apple started with Mac OS Mojave in the fall of 2018. The trend peaked in October 2019 when Gmail uh, started supporting dark mode, and a few months later, Outlook came, and the lives of email designers, marketers, and also developers turned upside down ever since. What made dark mode so popular? Simply, it had a so positive PR, and it became uh, some very cool among early adopters and geeks. The set benefits of dark mode are pretty diverse, starting from the fact that it's easier on the eyes, especially in low light conditions. It enhances legibility and readability. It saves battery life, which is only true for OLED screens, in fact. And finally, it can reduce blue light exposure and as a result help you fall asleep if you were playing around with your smartphone before bedtime. Some others say that this is just pure marketing, and there's currently no scientific evidence that dark mode could reduce the risk of eye strain. In fact, dark mode can actually make it harder to see by causing your pupils to dilate. This is especially true in brightly lit conditions. However, in low light conditions, it can be somewhat beneficial. On the other hand, dark mode shouldn't affect readability for most users either because it really depends on color contrast and not the fact that if a text is dark or white. While some companies have claimed that dark mode can improve concentration, research, and doesn't back this up. Because we as human beings are used to reading light text in a dark background for thousands of years, and that's what we can recognize the easiest. Some others say that dark mode can evoke negative emotions, sadness or mourning, or even depression in some people. But which one is your calling? Do you prefer light mode or dark mode? Please cast your vote in the poll section. When I prepared for this presentation, I really wanted to figure out how many people use dark mode, really. And I found some studies primarily conducted by biased geeks that claim that majority of people use dark mode, but I think that's completely untrue. And the most realistic research that I found online was conducted by Email on Acid roughly 2 years ago. And they found that based on six different campaigns, that on average 11.5% of people use dark mode because they are the ones who opened these six campaigns in the dark mode settings. Unfortunately, there is no fresher study available, but I would really appreciate one. What email clients support dark mode? Apple Mail, Outlook 2019, 365, and Windows 10 Mail. When it comes to desktop email clients, web email clients include Gmail, Outlook, Yahoo, Orange, and mobile email clients such as Gmail app, Outlook, and iOS Apple Mail, of course. The biggest market share belongs to Apple Mail. The second one is Gmail, and the third is Outlook. But take this with a grain of salt, especially if you have a non-US based list, because in many countries, Android is the majority. So there, of course, Apple Mail won't be the primary email client of those people. Now that you know what dark mode is and why is it important, we can dive deeper into understanding how dark mode modifies the emails that you actually send. I created several email variations to figure out how dark mode modifies emails. And this is the first version where I went from a black and white to a from a white and black to a black and white email, and always made sure that I use a highly contrasting enough text for the different sections. And this is how this black and white version looked like in dark mode What's the most visible from this test is that Outlook did the best job in turning this email into a complete dark message, since it transformed, we can call it inversion, but it's not a real inversion. It transformed the background color and also the text color in most cases, while some other clients, for example, in Gmail Android, the text became hardly legible in some cases because it turned everything text into white, but didn't transform the background color at all. I did the same test with bright colors, and I also made sure to add an outline to these logos in this example. As you can see, Gmail, iOS, and Outlook did the best job when it came to color transformations. Apple Mail didn't do a thing with the colors I used, while on Gmail Android, all text turned white and only yellow turned black. Who knows why? This third version was born to test how well-known brands' main colors would look in dark mode when paired with a text that has a high enough contrast ratio. And this example clearly shows that Apple Mail does modify colors in some cases, not in the previous examples, but in this one, it pretty much inverted all the text colors from dark to light or light to dark and completely messed up the other colors. And it left a bunch of light colors in the email and paired them with light text, which is completely illegible in this case. And as a final test, I created an email with background images, black and white, and also colorful ones. And actually, it doesn't make any difference if you use a colorful or a black and white background image. All email clients left the background images untouched, but Outlook and Gmail Android turned every text into white. And Gmail iOS simply inverted the colors, while Apple Mail didn't modify a thing. So if you use an image background, you have to be prepared for inverted colors and also white text pretty much everywhere in your email. And based on these tests and also some of the findings Litmus published earlier, you can see that, of course, there are no standards, and there were never email rendering standards. So in fact, we shouldn't be surprised. But there are ways to target some email clients, specifically Apple Mail, iPad, iPhone, iPad, Outlook 2019, and Gmail app. So you can fairly ask the question, is there any hack to solve this mess? And there are some folks who found hacks. Remy Parmentier, a fellow email geek, found a fix for Gmail using CSS blend modes. It works with a bunch of color combinations, not all. And there's also Nicole Merlin. She found a fix for Outlook using MSO gradients and VML code, but it only works in Outlook 365 and not the rest. Both of these approaches are quite complex to implement, and I think even if you manage to make them work consistently, then some of your subscribers wouldn't love that you just pretty much overrode their dark mode preferences. So that's why I call it a bit evil. So instead of trying to hack things, let's move on and figure out how you can prepare your emails for these inconsistencies. At first, what you will need is an in-house testing stack that requires at least an iPhone and an Android phone with Apple Mail, Gmail, and Outlook installed. But of course, alternatively, you can use email on acid or similar tools. After that, the best thing you can do is really build a unified email design system. Optimize it for dark mode and stick to it, because you don't want to do this testing all the time with your future emails. The fact that you have an email design system will not only improve your workflow, but will make this whole dark mode misery much easier. And what do you need to test for when you build your design system? You need to make sure that you don't end up with crazy colors in dark mode that you don't want your brand to be associated with. If you can remember, these email clients, pretty much most of them sometimes transform the, the primary brand color to a completely random one. You also need to keep in mind that the email clients don't check the background images. So if you use a background image, it needs to work with both white and dark text. But also in some cases, you can take advantage of it if you don't want to allow the actual email client to change a very important brand color. You can use a background image of that instead of that color, but don't overuse it. On the other hand, you also need to make sure that you optimize for a 4.5 to over 4.5 to 1 text to background contrast ratio on both dark and light modes. This will help people who have issues with their eyesight to actually read your messages. You should better use images with transparent backgrounds whenever possible and outline logos or social icons or such illustrations that make sense. As a final step in this presentation, I decided to build a simple dark mode friendly email design system just to showcase you how email how an email design system would look like in dark mode if it was built with the previous mindset. And I started out with only a few colors and different shades. So there's pretty much one primary and the secondary color here, and 3 additional shades. If you stick with a few colors, you will be on the easier side. The more colors you have in your design system, the more complex your job will be, especially when you need to prepare for dark mode and the different variations of the colors pairings. When it comes to text, I decided to stick with the standard Arial text and used only 3 different text sizes for headings and paragraphs, a fourth text size for buttons, and only 2 types of buttons, a primary and a secondary one. And this is eventually how this simple design system looked like in Apple Mail, both on light and dark mode. Since Apple Mail doesn't really change a thing in the email, it only updates the email client's UI to dark mode, thankfully, which is good for us as email marketers, not necessarily the best experience for the users. On the other hand, Outlook 365 on Mac turned everything into dark, but left the primary red color intact. Since this red is pretty strong, it's readable on a dark background too, especially if the text sizes are big enough. On the other hand, 365 changed a bunch of things on Windows 10. It pretty much updated all the colors. It turned the previous strong red into this pastel red everywhere, and it even inverted the dark parts and the light text that I used. Gmail app on Android behaved pretty similarly to Outlook. It turned everything into a dark mode style, and it pretty much used white text in the whole email. While on the other hand, Gmail app on iOS did the same as Outlook did previously. It transformed the strong red into this pastel red, and it also inverted the colors quite similarly. What was surprising to me that Gmail app behaves so differently on Android and iOS. So this is why when you do your testing on your own devices, you need to test for Gmail app on both. This is an example for Apple Mail iOS, which didn't change a thing in in case of my design, it only updated the body background from light to black, which is partly visible on these screenshots. But I was quite lucky. And of course, this was a result of a series of tests that I did with this primary color. But for example, if I was working for Starbucks, I wouldn't be so lucky because in my previous example, Starbucks's basil green turned into this turquoise green, and even the text color was turned into black. And finally, Outlook app on iOS behaved pretty much the same as Gmail app did on Android, and it did a great job when converting every background into black, but keeping the already dark parts as they were. This is exactly what I would expect from dark mode as a user, to be honest with you. And I'm not a big fan of Outlook, like I guess many of you as email marketers, but really the Outlook provides the best dark mode experience in my opinion. When I built this simple email design system, I used a bunch of tools that I wanted to list out for you. I used Figma for image outlining. I really hope that Adobe won't ruin Figma. I just heard they used recently. I used WebAIM for contrast checking, WebAIM contrast checker, and invertcolors.net to find the right colors and shades. I use ScreenMaster for mobile screenshots, Email on Asset for email client previews, and also Chameleon for email design and code. I have to admit that it was a really tedious and testing and tweaking process, and I wouldn't want to go through this with every email. That's why I believe that email marketers need to build and maintain a solid dark mode friendly email design system to ease their lives. I also know that it's not that easy to get started, so we decided to help established businesses to lay the foundations of their email design system. And we pick 5 brands each month for whom we build an email design system for free, and we even grant them 3 months of free access to Chameleon's email creation platform. If this is of interest to you, use the following link or QR code to apply, or hit me up in an email. And finally, I would like to end my session with a quote from Megan Bosch, who is a fellow email geek at SyncGmail. Since after so many years in the email design space, I have to completely agree with her because there's no such thing as pixel perfection email. And your goal always should be to provide the best experience possible for your audience, especially those who use dark mode. So really thank you for your time and attention. Hop on the Q&A, ask me questions right now. Feel free to connect me on LinkedIn and Twitter also if you want to stay in touch. And I would like to shout out a special thanks to the Email Camp design team for being flexible and creating this awesome dark mode themed presentation just for me. And enjoy the other sessions too. Have a nice day and see you in the Q&A. Thank you.
Hope you all enjoyed that presentation. Let's get some reactions in the chat there. Heck yeah. We'll bring Roland on here in just a moment. All right, let's get him in here, shall we? All right. Got some Q&A for Roland. I'll leave his contact information up there for just a moment so you guys can take a peek at that if you need to get in contact with Roland. All right. Cool. What's going on, Roland?
Hey guys, how you doing?
See ya. All right. All right, guys. Let's get some Q&A going on here, shall we? Roland, we got a lot of questions for you. Let's see here.
Let's go for it.
Let's go for it, shall we? All right. Man, we got a lot here. So first, someone wanted to ask, what if your current brand colors look horrible in dark mode or when inverted? Any advice for convincing brand style guide folks that changing things up is worth it?
I think it's a pretty tough question, especially if you have an older brand, because I wouldn't expect, a brand like Coca-Cola to change anything. That's why I looked up, especially bigger brands. I think for them, it's really not an option to change your brand color. So there, you just have to be really creative, figuring out what you can do, how you can play maybe with the background images, or how you can use gradients. For example, that's something I think Anna Tomlin mentioned in the question section. So it's a hell, it's a nightmare. There's no good solution, and I wouldn't expect brands to change colors. Maybe there could only be a way to come up with a few colors or parts of the email that will say that, okay, our email gets funky in dark mode, but that's it. If you want to enjoy the original, then please check it in light mode, because unfortunately we are too big to change our brand color.
Gotcha. Okay, and then let's see here. Ryan wanted to know, is there a way perhaps in CSS using important to force a color to stay the same regardless of color mode?
I'm not a developer, so I think Megan and the other folks who
Megan
talked
and Avi can
previously
take that one.
can speak for it. As far as I know, there are ways to force certain colors, but it's not consistently supported in email clients, so you won't be able to override it everywhere. So that won't be a perfect solution.
Nice. Okay, and then Tammy wanted to know, is there a map showing color conversions for dark mode per client?
Oh, that would be lovely. That's something that I wanted to create, but I just figured out that there's there are so many combinations, and if you remember the slide where I showed the brand colors, that was pretty much the last test that I did when I prepared these screenshots. And until then, for example, Apple, I think it was Apple Mail, didn't do a thing to my colors, no matter what I did. And in my case, it didn't modify anything because there was more than just a background color and the text paired together. There was always text, an image, a button. So it's not only about the color conversions, it's also about what that actual color is combined with. So there would be so many combinations, and I would love to see a map, but I'm not sure who would be that crazy to create it. and we implemented dark mode, Outlook's dark mode into Chameleon's email preview based on an article also Rami wrote, I think a year ago, or even more. And the logic is so crazy, so it's pretty unpredictable, and it's not documented anywhere. So we only found Outlook. You would need to find the others, or maybe Email on Asset team could create something like this because they have access to endless email previews. But it would be really time consuming.
We'll put some feelers out there. Somebody get this made. All right. Moving on here to the next one. So overall, if you could sum it up, what would be your top 3 tips for dark mode?
I think it's hard to. So I think the solution is really to do as much work as possible to actually build an email design system and optimize that one for dark mode. It won't help you in when you get started. It will help you in the long run if you have a design system, no matter if you hand code it or build it in a tool like what we provide. The second thing is try to minimize the number of colors that you use in your designs, because it will just make your life easier. You don't need to test for as many different variations. And what I found, maybe it's not always true because of the so many different combinations that I told you, is that if you have high enough contrast between the colors in light mode, then you are more likely to end up with something that works. Maybe it's not perfect, but it at least works, or is more or less enjoyable in dark mode. It won't be ideal still, but you're starting with an easier situation when you check out the dark mode version. But it maybe doesn't apply in every case. it applied in my tests at least.
Nice. All right, y'all. Okay, let's see. What else? Oh, we got a bunch in here. But I want to keep it still within. No, I'm trying to do any developer questions because we already had our developers. We'll come back to them in a little bit. Cool. Well, Roland, that was perfect that was a perfect presentation, and thank you so much for being here today to answer some questions for us for nighttime drives, how to prepare your email design system for dark mode, y'all.
Yeah,
And
thanks
there was
for
a
having
question
me.
earlier. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, Roland. Someone asked us earlier. What is the best way to implement dark mode emails? Well, this whole presentation is implementing it. So whoever asked that earlier, you just got to come back to this and make sure you watch the whole thing over again, because Roland's tips are the tips. So Roland,
Yeah,
thank you so much for
I
being
guess,
here.
I don't have developer tips because I'm not a developer myself, but maybe there will be some other folks here talking about the developer side of things.
Oh, no worries. We were just happy you
I
were here,
guess
man.
there will be. Yeah, and again, a special thanks to the email camp team for making this presentation dark mode style in the dark mode style, because
Yes.
it was originally light mode too. So, but they were flexible enough to prepare for it. And thanks for the almost 400 people that showed up. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Yeah, we got tons more people coming back. Roland, thank you so much for being here. Hope to see you soon. Thanks for coming on Email Camp, and take care. We'll see you.
See you. Bye bye.